The lights danced across the room, reflecting off the polished floor, while the music rocked the bodies in almost perfect synchronicity. The atmosphere was impeccable, a carefully planned company party, an event that symbolized not only professional achievements, but also the unity of everyone present. I watched everything, maintaining a social smile while a storm grew inside me. This was supposed to be a time for celebration, but all I felt was the weight of betrayal. She was there, radiant in a dress I had personally chosen, dancing with him. My heart seemed to squeeze with every turn they took on the dance floor, every smile she flashed at that man, as if there was no one else in the world. Part of me wanted to believe that it was just a misunderstanding, a misinterpreted situation, but the reality was clear and sharp. They didn't make a point of disguising it. Not to me. "Are you all right?" someone asked me. I nodded mechanically, avoiding eye contact. The last thing I wanted was a public confrontation, but something in me knew that the evening would take an unexpected turn. Their dance wasn't just a moment of fun. It was a provocation, a carefully orchestrated spectacle. They laughed, they whispered, while I stood there, motionless. A forced spectator in a theater of humiliation. Hours before, I had already felt the chill of distrust. Small details that might have gone unnoticed before now gained new layers of meaning. Calls that ended abruptly, messages read and deleted, the growing distance between us that I had attributed to the stress of work. But none of this prepared me for that scene. I took a deep breath, searching for the strength to confront her there, in front of everyone. Part of me wanted to scream, to demand answers, to expose the truth that she was trying so hard to hide. But another part, one I barely recognized, longed for silence. A silence that would cut deeper than any words. They broke off dancing, laughing, and he moved away to get drinks. It was at that moment that our gazes finally met. Her smile disappeared in an instant. She knew. She knew that I knew. The tension was palpable, a moment frozen in time. I approached slowly, each step calculated, while she remained motionless, as if trying to prepare herself for what was to come. "Can I talk to you for a moment?" My voice came out low but firm. She hesitated before agreeing, following me to a far corner of the room. Her gaze was restless, searching for signs of anger or sadness in me, but all she found was a cold calm. "Do you think I don't know?" I asked, cutting through the silence. She blinked rapidly, as if struck by an invisible blow. "I know everything." "What are you talking about?" Her voice was a whisper, almost inaudible over the sound of the music and the laughter in the background. But I wouldn't be fooled. This was a desperate attempt to buy time, to create a convincing lie. "Him. You. That ridiculous dance that you think nobody noticed. That's what I'm talking about." My tone was low, but charged with an intensity she couldn't ignore. She opened her mouth to reply, but nothing came out. For the first time in years, I saw her lost, not in control of the situation. It was strange to see someone so used to manipulating scenarios confronted by the truth. "I'm going to end this now," I announced, turning my back on her and walking towards the stage. My mind was racing, but my objective was clear. I wouldn't be the fool to put my head down and pretend that nothing had happened. When I picked up the microphone, the whole room turned its attention to me. "Good evening," I began, trying to keep my voice steady. "I know you're all here to celebrate another successful year, but for me, tonight marks the end of something much bigger. I'd like to take this moment to announce something important." She was standing in the middle of the room, wide-eyed, pale as a statue. He had just returned with the drinks, but now he seemed to want to disappear into the crowd. "I want to announce my divorce." The words came out clearly, cutting through the air like a blade. "And my reason is here in this room. After all, there are things you can't ignore. Some betrayals, for example." The buzz was instantaneous. All eyes turned to her and, inevitably, to the man next to her. She stood motionless, shocked, without reaction, while he tried to appear invisible. But it was too late. The bomb had exploded and the consequences were inevitable. I stepped down from the stage, leaving the confusion behind. In the back of my mind, a persistent voice repeated the question, how did it come to this? I was about to discover that the answer was more complicated than I could ever have imagined. Welcome to the channel. Here, we do not tolerate and never support any kind of betrayal. The stories you'll hear are fictional, created to show how betrayal destroys lives, families, and trust. Get ready for an intense narrative, full of twists and turns, deep emotions and a powerful message. Now, settle in and be ready to listen to a shocking story that will stay in your mind for a long time. Good story. The dawn lights softly illuminated the spacious house where Oliver and Emily had lived for over a decade. It was an elegant residence, marked by classic architecture, with large windows that let the sunlight in generously, illuminating the moments of a seemingly perfect life. On the outside, they were the dream couple. He, a methodical man, dedicated to his work as a project manager in a large company. She, an engaging, charismatic woman who knew how to captivate any room she entered, working in the same company as an event organizer. Their routine was structured, almost flawless. Every morning, Oliver left early for the office, dressed in well-tailored suits, while Emily devoted the first hours of the day to organizing the house and preparing projects for corporate events. In between their professional commitments, they found time to look after their little daughter, Sophie, aged 7, whose laughter was their favorite tune. Oliver was a man of habit. He appreciated the comfort that routine provided. His relationship with Emily seemed to be the foundation of this stability. The complicity they shared was visible to everyone around them, from close friends to work colleagues. "You and Emily are the example of what a marriage should be," they often said, comments that he received with a modest but proud smile. Emily, on the other hand, was always more free-spirited. Although she admired the consistency and security that Oliver offered, she sometimes felt suffocated by the weight of expectations that the perfect marriage seemed to impose. She was a woman who liked movement, novelty, and her profession gave her the opportunity to explore her creativity, to be surrounded by people and to feel alive in the midst of so many challenges. Even so, Emily had a genuine affection for Oliver. He was the man who had been by her side during the most difficult times, such as her unexpected pregnancy and the period of uncertainty that followed. Oliver was a pillar, the partner who made sure she never faced a bad day without support. She knew this, and this certainty fueled a feeling of gratitude that, for her, was often mistaken for love. In recent months, however, something seemed to have changed in the couple's dynamic. Oliver, although always present, was becoming more and more involved in his work, spending nights analyzing reports or in endless meetings. He believed he was doing it for them, for the financial stability he valued so much. Emily, on the other hand, was beginning to feel an emptiness, a distance that she didn't know how to fill. Conversations that used to be long and full of laughter were now reduced to small comments about the day's agenda or trivial updates. One day, when he got home later than usual, Oliver found Emily in the kitchen, absent-mindedly stirring one of the pots of pasta Sophie loved. "Hi, love," he said, putting the folder on the table. She looked up and smiled softly, but something in her expression seemed distant. He hesitated for a moment before moving closer to kiss her on the forehead. "How was your day?" "Rushed, as usual. The end-of-term party is more work than I expected. And Sophie's excited about the school recital. I hope she can get off work early to come with us." Emily looked away from the pot of pasta, as if it were the center of the universe. "Of course I will." Oliver answered quickly, not noticing the twinge of doubt in her tone. He reached for a glass of water, feeling the subtle tension that seemed to hang in the air. She didn't mention it, but he knew something was wrong. It wasn't a blatant tension, but rather that dense silence that suggests there is much more behind what has been said. Emily, for her part, was dealing with feelings that she herself didn't know how to name. She loved the idea of the life she had with Oliver, but she couldn't ignore the growing feeling that something was missing. It wasn't his fault, and she knew it. He was everything anyone could wish for in a partner: devoted, faithful, kind. But there was a restlessness inside her that seemed to cry out for something she couldn't define. While Oliver plunged further into his professional responsibilities, Emily found herself increasingly involved in the preparations for the company's big party. It was her biggest project of the year, an event that would bring together not only employees, but also important clients and partners. It was a golden opportunity for her to shine, and she knew it. In the days leading up to the party, she spent endless hours taking care of every detail, from the decorations to the menu, making sure everything was perfect. Oliver noticed how busy she was, but saw it as a legitimate passion for her career. He tried to support her in any way he could, looking after Sophie or helping with small tasks around the house. "You look amazing, you know that," he said one evening, watching her as she checked the guest list. Emily smiled automatically, thanking him, but her mind was miles away. On the morning of the party, Emily looked radiant. She had chosen an elegant dress, something that matched the glamour of the event, but still discreet enough to reflect her position as organizer. Oliver complimented her sincerely as he helped her put on her coat. "It's going to be an incredible evening. I'm sure you'll rock it." She smiled, but inside, something in her struggled to ignore her mixed feelings. "I hope you have fun too. It'll be nice to get out of the routine for a bit, don't you think?" And so, with those words, they both headed off to the event, each carrying their own expectations, their own silent conflicts. Oliver, without knowing it, hoped to find that night a renewal for what he believed to be a solid love. Emily, on the other hand, carried the uncertainty of a search that she herself didn't understand. They didn't know it, but that party would mark the beginning of changes that would transform their lives in ways neither of them could have foreseen. The party was in full swing when Oliver arrived in the hall. He watched everything with restrained admiration, impressed by the care Emily had put into every detail. The hanging lights created an enchanting glow, the buffet looked impeccable, and the guests seemed relaxed and happy. She always had that talent for creating perfect moments, he thought, as he walked around the room looking for his wife. Emily was in the center of the room, surrounded by colleagues and important clients, laughing with that natural ease that made her a star at any event. Oliver noticed how people's eyes lit up when talking to her, how she managed to turn an ordinary interaction into something memorable. He watched her with a mixture of pride and love, although a hint of insecurity began to niggle at the back of his mind. As the evening progressed, Oliver noticed that Emily was more animated than usual. It wasn't just the glow of the occasion or the relief of seeing the event go well, there was something different. She seemed to be on a different frequency, laughing louder, gesturing with more energy, her eyes sparkling in a way he hadn't seen for a while. He tried to shake off the unease that was beginning to form, but he couldn't help wondering what was changing. "She looks amazing today, doesn't she?" commented a coworker who stopped next to Oliver, raising a glass of champagne. "You're lucky, my friend. She's the soul of this party." Oliver smiled politely, but the words sounded like an uncomfortable reminder that Emily was, in fact, admired by everyone. He began to notice who she was talking to, how she interacted, trying to ignore the tightness in his chest that only seemed to grow. Finally, when Emily approached him, carrying 2 glasses of wine, she seemed distracted, almost as if she were in another world. "I'm sorry I haven't been with you much today," she said, handing him the glass. "Everything's been so hectic, but I'm glad you came." "Of course I came. I wouldn't have missed it for anything." He tried to keep his voice light, but there was discomfort in his tone. She noticed, but chose not to comment. Instead, she gave him a quick smile and turned her attention to a group of guests calling out to her. Oliver stayed where he was, staring at the glass in his hand and sensing that something was out of place. He began to observe more closely, looking for some sign that would explain the strange sensation he couldn't name. It wasn't long before he noticed something, a man who always seemed to be near Emily. He didn't recognize him, but it was clear that there was something unusual about the way the two interacted. The man followed her gaze, his gestures were intimate, and the smiles they exchanged had an intensity that wasn't appropriate. Trying not to look obvious, Oliver began to move around the room, keeping Emily and the man in his field of vision. He didn't want to believe what his mind was beginning to suggest, but every movement, every look, seemed to confirm his worst fears. The man approached her with an uncomfortable familiarity, and she, for her part, didn't back away. In fact, she seemed to respond to his energy, albeit in a subtle way. Oliver felt his stomach churn when he saw the two of them moving away to a more secluded corner. He followed them at a distance, stopping at a point where he could see them without being noticed. Emily was talking to the man, her face lit up with a smile he hadn't seen for a long time. The man leaned closer, saying something that made her laugh. It was a different kind of laugh, looser, more carefree. Oliver felt a chill run down his spine as he realized that there was an intimacy between them that he couldn't ignore. For a moment, he thought about moving closer, about interrupting the conversation with some excuse, but he couldn't move. Something held him in place, as if part of him was still trying to find another explanation for what he was seeing. Perhaps it was just a misunderstood friendship, perhaps it was the atmosphere of the party that was making everything seem more intense than it really was. But then it happened. The man put his hand on Emily's arm, a seemingly innocent gesture, but loaded with meaning that Oliver couldn't ignore. He saw how she didn't pull away, how there was no discomfort in that touch. On the contrary, it seemed natural, even intimate. It was at that moment that Oliver realized he could no longer pretend that nothing was happening. He felt as if the ground was opening up under his feet. The sound of the party seemed distant, muffled, as he stood there, motionless, trying to process what he had just witnessed. It was as if the world had slowed down, each second dragging by as he struggled to come to terms with the reality that now stood before him. When he finally managed to move, Oliver turned around and walked towards the exit. He needed air, space to think. Every step seemed heavy, every breath difficult. He felt crushed by the weight of the betrayal which, although it had not yet been confirmed in words, was clear in every gesture he had seen. Outside, the night was cold, but he barely felt the temperature. His body was numb, his mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Anger, sadness, confusion, all competing for space as he tried to decide what to do next. He didn't know how long he stood there, staring into the void, before he decided to go back. There was something he had to face, something he couldn't ignore. He entered the hall again, his heart beating fast, his mind prepared for the confrontation he knew would come. The final moment came when, from a distance, he saw her dancing with the man. It was more than he could bear. He clenched his fists, feeling the anger rising, but forced himself to remain calm. He knew he had to act, but how? How could he confront the person he loved about something that could destroy everything they had built together? The company meeting room was the place where Oliver decided that everything would finally be confronted. There was no more putting it off or running away. After the party, he spent a sleepless night going over the details that had transformed his perception of Emily. But what hurt most was not the act of betrayal itself, but the layers of lies and secrets that now seemed to unfold in his mind, like a jigsaw puzzle that was finally complete. The clock struck 10 when Emily entered, surprised to see Oliver there, sitting in the main chair, a spot he rarely occupied. "Did you call me in for a meeting?" she asked, trying to hide her nervousness. Her voice was controlled, but the restless look in her eyes revealed that she felt the gravity of the moment. "Yes," Oliver replied, his voice low and controlled. "We need to talk." "Sit down." Emily hesitated for a moment, but pulled out a chair and sat down opposite him. The silence between them was almost unbearable, as heavy as a storm about to break. "What's this about? Something to do with the party?" "Because if it's about it's about the party, yes," Oliver interrupted, firmly. "But it's also about much more than that." She crossed her hands on the table, trying to stay calm, but the trembling in her fingers gave away her anxiety. "What exactly do you mean?" Oliver took a deep breath, trying to organize the thoughts that had plagued him since the night before. I saw the two of you, Emily. I saw everything. You and that man. There's no denying what's happening. For a moment, Emily seemed petrified. Her eyes widened slightly before she looked away, searching the room for something to support her. Oliver. I can explain, she began, but her voice faltered, as if the words refused to come out. Explain. He let out a dry, bitter laugh. Where do you want to start? The fact that you treated me like an idiot while you were playing with another man right in front of me? Or the fact that, despite all the times I tried to save our marriage, you chose to lie? It wasn't like that, she whispered, finally finding her voice. I lost myself, Oliver. I don't know what happened to me. Lost yourself? He shook his head in disbelief. Do you think that's a justification? Do you think I didn't see enough yesterday? Because what I saw was clear, Emily. Clear as day. There's no explanation that can erase that. Emily lowered her head, the tears already starting to roll. I never wanted this to happen. I never wanted to hurt you. But you did. And that's not all, he continued, his voice laden with pain. You destroyed what we'd built. Everything. You threw it all away for what, Emily? For a bit of excitement. For a bit of attention. She finally raised her eyes, staring at him. You don't understand what was happening to me. I felt invisible, Oliver. Like I was just part of the furniture in the house, someone you saw but never really saw. Oh, so it's my fault now? He retorted, his anger finally boiling over. It's my fault for working to secure our family's future. For thinking I was doing the right thing. I saw you, Emily. I've always seen you. But I guess that wasn't enough, was it? She opened her mouth to reply, but the door opened before she could say anything. The man from the party entered, his expression cautious but determined. It was obvious that he knew what was going on, and that his presence there was no coincidence. Oliver stared at him coldly, every muscle in his body tense. Ah, how convenient. The star of the evening turns up. I didn't know you'd be here, the man said, his voice quavering. But you knew you'd be with my wife, didn't you? Oliver shot up, standing up. Tell me, how does someone like you think you can just walk into someone else's life and destroy them like that? Please, Oliver, Emily interrupted, her voice shaking. Don't make this harder than it already is. Harder? He laughed, but without humor. Hard as trying to sleep at night knowing that the person you love has lied to you. It's hard trying to imagine what the future will be like after a betrayal like that. That's hard, Emily. The silence returned to the room, heavy and suffocating. But then Oliver looked at the man and something else emerged in his expression, something deeper than anger, something closer to understanding. Why are you here, anyway? He asked, his voice more controlled but still sharp. What's your excuse? The man hesitated before answering, clearly uncomfortable. I just wanted to clear things up. Clear things up. Oliver leaned forward, his eyes piercing the other man. Then come on. Clarify. I'm listening. The man took a deep breath, but before he could speak, Emily interrupted him. Stop. Don't do that. Please. Don't do what? Oliver asked, his attention now focused on Emily. What else are you hiding? The man looked at her, then at Oliver, before finally saying, the truth is, this was never just about the two of us. Emily and I, we share something that goes beyond what you imagine. Oliver remained motionless, his mind spinning as he tried to understand the other man's words. What the hell does that mean? Emily tried to intervene, but the man continued, his voice now firmer. Oliver, she didn't want you to know. But it's time you understood what's really going on. The shock that followed was absolute, but the words that followed promised to shake everything up even more. Oliver knew he was about to face a revelation that would change his life forever. He just didn't know if he was ready for it. Oliver stared at them both with half-closed eyes, trying to process what he had just heard. The tension in the room seemed to pulse, suffocating, and no one seemed willing to break the silence. Emily opened her mouth to say something, but gave up instantly. Her gaze was lost, begging the man not to say anything more. "You have exactly 5 seconds to explain to me what you mean by that." Oliver finally broke the silence, his voice low and laden with menace. "And I suggest you be convincing." The man cleared his throat, looking away from Emily before turning back to Oliver. "I think it would be better if we talked in private." "You think you're going to order me around?" Oliver retorted, taking a step closer, his figure now more intimidating. "You're in no position to demand anything." "Then please continue." "I'm dying of curiosity." Emily took a deep breath, as if she wanted to intervene again, but Oliver held up a hand, silencing her. "No. You've had your chances to be honest. Now, I want to hear what he has to say." The man hesitated but, with a heavy sigh, finally spoke. "It's not just about what happened between Emily and me. It's something that started long before that. Something you never knew about." Oliver felt his whole body stiffen. "Go on." "More than 8 years ago," the man began, choosing his words carefully, "Emily and I met. Not here, but before you two got married." The shock hit Oliver like a punch. He stared at Emily, expecting a denial, any sign that this was a lie. But she looked away, tears now streaming freely down her face. "Are you saying that you two?" Oliver couldn't complete the sentence. The weight of the revelation seemed to overwhelm him. Emily finally found her voice, although it was only a whisper. "It was before you, Oliver. Before us. I thought I'd never see him again. I thought it was a closed chapter." "A closed chapter that you've apparently decided to revisit," Oliver shot back, his voice laced with bitterness. "And you thought I'd never find out? I didn't plan any of this," Emily exclaimed, finally raising her voice. "I didn't even know he'd be in the company when I took the job. I was happy with you, with our life. But when I saw him again, you threw it all away," Oliver finished for her, his voice cold. He looked at the man, hatred simmering in his gaze. "And you? What do you think you're going to get out of it? Some kind of cheap justification for what you did?" The man raised his hands, as if to defend himself. "I'm not here to justify anything. I just thought you deserved to know the whole truth." "How kind of you," Oliver replied with cutting sarcasm. "And what exactly do you expect me to do with this truth? Thank you for destroying my family." Emily tried to approach Oliver, but he took a step back, raising his hands. "No. Don't touch me. I want distance from all this." "Oliver, please," she begged, her voice breaking. "I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted it to come to this." "But it has," he replied, his voice as cold as ice. "And now, there's no going back." Silence fell over the room again, but this time it was interrupted by the sound of a knock on the door. An assistant opened it cautiously, informing him that there was an important meeting about to start and that the space needed to be cleared. Oliver laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "Looks like we don't have any more time to do the laundry here. Not that it matters. The conversation is over." He picked up the jacket that was hanging on the chair and started walking towards the exit. Emily ran to catch up with him, taking him by the arm. "Please, Oliver. Don't go like that. We need to talk." He stopped, but didn't look at her. "Talk? We've talked enough. Now I need to decide what to do with the wreckage you left behind." He disentangled himself from her and left, leaving Emily standing there, sobbing. The man remained silent, not knowing what to do or say. Oliver went downstairs quickly, ignoring the curious looks from the staff. His mind was in a whirl, his thoughts racing in a desperate attempt to understand what had just happened. Every word spoken in that room echoed like a blow. He walked out of the main door of the building, taking a deep breath of the cold air. But the relief he was hoping for didn't come. He walked to the parking lot and got into his car, but didn't start it. He stood there with his hands on the steering wheel, trying to calm down. But the images of Emily and that man, the secrets that had been revealed, wouldn't leave him alone. He knew that nothing would ever be the same, that the life he knew was over. But what came next? He didn't know. And that was even more frightening. The car remained motionless in the parking lot for long minutes, while Oliver stared at the empty horizon in front of him. The words spoken in the living room still echoed in his mind, creating a tangle of emotions that he couldn't untangle. Emily's betrayal was a deep wound, but what tormented him most was the unexpected revelation about her past with that man. A past that, until then, had been completely unknown to him. The cold late afternoon wind stirred the trees around them, but Oliver felt nothing but the suffocating heat of anger and disappointment. He closed his eyes, trying to organize his thoughts. As much as he wanted to get away from the situation, he knew he couldn't just leave it all behind. There was Sophie. There was a whole life built with Emily, however fragile she now seemed. He finally started the car, but didn't drive home. He couldn't bear the thought of entering that space that now seemed empty and contaminated by the lies that had been revealed. Instead, he drove aimlessly, allowing the streets guided by instinct to take him somewhere where he could think clearly. He stopped at a park he used to visit years ago, even before he met Emily. There, under the shade of ancient trees, he found a secluded bench and sat down, feeling the weight of the day fall on him. Thoughts of Sophie hit him hard. How would he explain the situation to his daughter? How could he maintain the stability she so desperately needed while his own life was in pieces? He found himself caught in an overwhelming moral dilemma: face Emily directly and cut all ties, or try for a solution that, however painful, would preserve his daughter's well-being. While Oliver was lost in these thoughts, Emily was at home, pacing back and forth like a cornered animal. After Oliver's abrupt departure from the company, she knew she had to act, but she had no idea how. She had called him several times, but every call was ignored. Guilt consumed her, but there was something even more frightening: the uncertainty about what he would do next. Emily looked at the impeccable living room, every detail organized according to Oliver's tastes. That house had been a symbol of the life they had built together, but now it just looked like an empty shell, devoid of meaning. Sophie played in her room, oblivious to the chaos that was unfolding between her parents. Emily knew she couldn't hide the truth forever, but how could she explain something so complex to a child of only 7? When night fell, Oliver finally decided to go home. He parked in the driveway, but stayed in the car for a few moments, watching the lights come on through the windows. He could see Emily's silhouette in the living room, her posture tense as she waited for him. Taking a deep breath, he got out of the car and went inside. Emily turned around immediately, her eyes swollen and red from crying. "You didn't answer my calls," she said, her voice shaking. "I had nothing to say," Oliver replied coldly, walking past her towards the kitchen. He picked up a glass of water and stood there, his back to Emily, trying to find the right words. When he finally turned around, the look on her face was one of pure pleading. "I know what I did was unforgivable," she began, taking a step towards him. "But please don't destroy our family because of it." Oliver let out a bitter laugh. "Our family? Did you think about our family when you decided to get involved with that man? Did you think about Sophie?" "I made a mistake," she admitted, her voice breaking. "I know I was wrong. But I don't want to lose you. I don't want to lose the life we've built." "Built?" Oliver crossed his arms, staring at her incredulously. "The life I thought we had was based on lies. You built something else, Emily. Something that never included me." Emily began to cry, but he offered no comfort. He was tired of being the one to carry the weight of keeping everything together. After a long silence, he spoke, his voice firm but laden with sadness. "I don't know how we can go on like this. I don't know if I want to go on." She fell to her knees, covering her face with her hands. "Please, Oliver. Don't give up on us." He looked at her, feeling a mixture of pity and anger. For a moment, he wanted to comfort her, to tell her that everything would be all right. But he knew that would be a lie. The betrayal had created a chasm between them that seemed impossible to cross. "Sophie doesn't deserve this," he finally said. "She deserves stability, she deserves parents who can be there for her, even if they're not together." Emily raised her head, hope appearing in her gaze. "So you're saying that we can try?" Oliver shook his head slowly. "I don't know, Emily. I just know that I need time. I need to think about what's best for me, for you and, above all, for our daughter." The silence hung over them again, heavy and full of uncertainty. Oliver knew that the decision to come would be the hardest of his life. And, as he climbed the stairs to his room, he realized that, whatever path he chose, nothing would ever be the same. The silence in the house became a constant presence in the weeks that followed. Oliver and Emily continued to share the same space, but any trace of closeness had disappeared. Interactions were short, practical, and always centered on Sophie, who, as innocent as she was beginning to realize that something was wrong. Oliver spent most of his time away, immersed in work or on solitary walks that seemed endless. Emily, on the other hand, remained at home, as if trapped, trying, without success, to find a way to repair the damage she had caused. One night, while Sophie was asleep, Oliver came downstairs and found Emily sitting on the sofa, her eyes fixed on an old family photo. He hesitated for a moment before sitting down in the armchair next to her. The weight of the moment seemed almost to crush them. "I spoke to a lawyer today," he began, breaking the silence. Emily looked up quickly, fear evident in her expression. "Have you decided?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "It wasn't an easy decision," he said, taking a deep breath before continuing. "But I think we need to move on. Separately." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Emily let the photo fall into her lap, the tears beginning to roll silently down her face. "I knew it would happen. But to hear you say it, it hurts more than I imagined." "I'm hurt too, Emily," he replied, his voice firm but sad. "But what happened isn't something we can just get over. It changed everything. And as much as I wanted it to be different, I can't ignore what you did. I can't go on like this." She shook her head slowly, wiping away the tears. "I know I've lost you. I know there's no going back. But I still love you, Oliver. I always will." He looked away, unable to cope with the intensity of her words. "Love, Emily, isn't just about words. It's about choices. And your choices have brought us here." Over the next few days, Oliver began to organize the separation. He made it clear that Sophie would be his priority and that he wanted shared custody that would allow his daughter to continue seeing both parents. Emily agreed without question, although the thought of losing daily contact with Sophie destroyed her inside. Despite everything, she knew it was the least she owed Oliver and her daughter. As the legal proceedings progressed, Oliver found a strange sense of relief at finally being away from Emily. The pain was still there, but he began to see the possibility of a fresh start. It was on one of these afternoons, while walking in the park, that he met someone who would change the course of his life. Molly, a woman he had met at a corporate event years ago, was sitting on a bench, reading a book. He hesitated before approaching her, but something about her serenity drew him in. They talked for hours, discovering a connection that seemed natural, almost inevitable. Molly had also been through a difficult divorce and understood the whirlwind of emotions Oliver was facing. Their friendship grew quickly and, over time, became something more. Emily, on the other hand, plunged into a painful process of self-evaluation. She began attending therapy, determined to understand the choices that had led her to destroy her marriage. The pain of separation was intense, but she used it as fuel to become a better mother to Sophie and a more self-aware person. Although she knew she could never win back Oliver's love, she at least wanted to forgive herself. The man who had been the pivot of the betrayal disappeared from their lives as quickly as he had appeared. Oliver found out that he had been fired from the company after the mess, and Emily never looked for him again. He became a shadow of the past, something they both preferred to leave buried. Months later, when the divorce was finalized, Oliver felt a mixture of relief and sadness as he signed the papers. It was a necessary closure, but one that brought with it the awareness of how much he had lost. However, when he left the lawyer's office, he found Molly waiting for him. She smiled, a simple gesture, but one that carried a promise of better days. Emily watched from afar as Oliver rebuilt his life. Despite the pain, she felt a twinge of hope that he was finding happiness again. She knew she would never have the happy ending she had imagined, but she also knew that she had grown from the experience. Sophie, seeing her mother more present and attentive, began to regain the joy that had seemed lost since the separation. In the end, everyone found their own way, although marked by the scars of what had happened. Oliver moved on with Molly, discovering that love could be reborn even after devastation. Emily found the strength to rebuild her life and create a solid relationship with Sophie. The impact of the betrayal was never forgotten, but became a lesson for everyone involved. Now it's up to you. What did you think of this story? Share your opinion in the comments. And if you're not already a subscriber, take the opportunity to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any of our stories. Remember, here we show how betrayal destroys lives, because we believe that honesty is the foundation of any relationship. Thanks for following and see you next time.